Raglin, and thanks so much to Brad Proctor for hosting me on 31 Days of Horror. This is my piece, Elevator Boys. It wasn't Garrett's fault Evan fell down the elevator shaft, but he blamed himself anyway. We discovered the place during a post-trick-or-treat urban exploration. This was the era when parents told their kids to go outside and stop bothering them. Just be home for dinner. We climbed through the condemned housing project's lowest broken window, then took the crumbling concrete stairs 6 floors up, navigating without flashlights. Sometimes glass crunched underfoot, a beer bottle or a syringe. Other times the detritus was a squishy, sour-smelling mystery. Raymond bet his Halloween haul it was a turd, and Evan guessed it was a dead rat. We never found out because that's when Garrett pointed out the elevator. Its metal jaws opened at a slant, beckoning. We took turns peeking down the shaft, shouting, "Penis!" and listening as the word plunged 6 stories down and then echoed back up. It made us giggle every time. The bottom remained cloaked in shadow. Our only light came from the hallway's cracked window, moon spilling through swirling clouds of mold and asbestos. When shouting, "Penis!" got boring, Raymond and I, the mature ones, hung back. We fumbled blindly through our candy bags, hunting for Reese's peanut butter cups. I popped one in my mouth and let the wrapper drift to the carpet of trash below. Had the city torn down this abandoned building, Evan might have lived to see another Halloween, but ironically, the holiday played a part in his death. It was that damn dollar store vampire cape. He tripped over it 100 times while we were trick-or-treating, leaving the end mangled and dusty. Much more Dracula-like than it had looked straight out of the package. If only he'd taken it off for convenience sake. But Evan always committed to his role. On Halloween, in games of cops and robbers, in the elementary school play. While Raymond and I ate candy, Evan and Garrett stood together at the elevator opening, howling like werewolves. The echo was deafening, as if a whole pack were at the bottom. I smiled and, with a mouthful of chocolate, joined the joyful racket. Even Raymond, who normally told us to shut up when we were being loud, let out a howl. What happened next has never left my memory. Garrett was first to hear the beating of bat wings. He yelped and jumped backwards as 100 dark shapes zipped out of the elevator and into the hallway. Garrett's sudden motion threw Evan off balance, and he windmilled his arms to stay upright. That's when his cape caught under his foot for the final time. Following our fading howls was a breathless whoosh, a violent frenzy of wings, a metallic crash, and then he was gone. The building stayed up. Evan's parents wrote countless letters to the mayor begging him to demolish it, but the city didn't have money. They only made room in the budget when the same thing happened to Garrett 3 years later. Garrett, Raymond, and I visited the building every Halloween to pay our respects. We never told our parents. The building deteriorated from one year to the next. A dozen more graffiti artists had used it as a canvas, and just as many squatters had used it as a bathroom. The smell made us gag, but we never turned back. Raymond was the first to suggest the Reese's ritual. One by one, we'd approach the elevator shaft and dump our Reese's inside. A gift for Evan in the afterlife. Whenever Raymond and I did it, we'd stand by the shaft and listen. For a few seconds, we'd hear only the dull whistle of a wind tunnel. But then came the chewing. The sound would continue for a minute, wet and loud and crinkling, as the Reese's were devoured, wrapper and all. It terrified me the first time, but eventually I found it comforting. It was as if Evan were sitting next to me in the school cafeteria. When Garrett dumped his Reese's, it was different. There was never any chewing, never the feeling that Evan had pulled up to the table smiling, his lunchbox loaded with candy. Garrett shouted down the shaft to see if Evan was full, but no voice responded, not even Garrett's own echo. There was only an all-consuming silence. He tried again the next year, insisting he make the first offering, but the response was the same. He didn't talk for a week after that. Then came the third try. Same as before, Raymond and I made our offerings, and just as usual, the thing in the elevator shaft accepted them. I couldn't be sure it was Evan, but I like to think it was. When I asked Garrett if he could hear the chewing, he shook his head and drew in a long, shuddering breath. His arms trembled like they did when he drank too many Cokes at a sleepover. I thought about putting a hand on his shoulder, but decided against it. When the chewing ended, Raymond and I stepped away from the elevator shaft. Garrett approached, his breath shallow and fast. He opened his candy bag, but instead of just offering the Reese's, he dumped his entire haul. The pieces tumbled down the shaft, pattering against its sides. Raymond winced like he did whenever I told a joke, and no one laughed. I stared at my feet and closed my eyes. When a minute passed without me chewing, a different sound cut through the darkness. A zipper, then a steady stream of water. Tensing, I looked up. "Is this what you want, Evan?" Garrett shouted, pissing down the shaft. "What do I have to do to—" Raymond grabbed Garrett's shoulder to pull him back, but Garrett whipped around for a haymaker. His fist skimmed Raymond's ear, but the momentum carried him in an uncontrolled circle. I knew what was about to happen, and given how wide his eyes were, Garrett did too. I tried to catch his shirt as he fell backward, but I was too late. This time, there were no flitting bats, only Garrett's scream, high and long and sad, and the crunch of his body breaking. I would have screamed too, but one final sound paralyzed me. Chewing. No longer chocolate and plastic crinkling between teeth, but tendons and bones snapping between jaws. It couldn't have been Evan in that elevator shaft. I can't accept that he'd hold a grudge against Garrett, that he'd torture him with such cruel silence. That's not the friend I remember. But maybe people change when they die. Maybe the dead crave vengeance. Thank you so much for listening and watching this video, and thank you again to Brad Proctor for hosting this series.